What's good? My name's Negative Karma. I play an Awakened Berserker on the NA servers, and today I'm going to be going over the basics of Awakened Berserker PvP with these new changes. In the modern iteration of BDO, we currently don't have things like click to move, which Berserker historically has in the past, and that's fundamentally changed the way that Berserker's played. There's been some serious reworks over the class and how things work, and there's not a great source of information to get that out there. By no means am I a top tier Berserker player, but I have an idea of what I'm doing, and hopefully this can help out somebody who's new to the class that's trying to figure out whether or not this is something they're interested in. The pros of Berserker: you are both a range and a melee class, and you have some of the best CC in the game. You have great forms of range CC that's very useful for you and your teammates. And you have access to 3 grabs, which is unique to your class. Downsides of Berserker: your damage is pretty lackluster, you're a forward guard class, so you're not able to SA trade. You will lose every single SA trade in the game. With the removal of the click to move, our precision on our abilities like Lava Piercer and Giant Leap are pretty bad. The overall control and the flow of the class is kind of just lost its cadence. So if you're coming into this as a brand new experience, I think that you'll be okay. But for a lot of veteran Berserker players, this is something that is frustrating, and as a result has kind of reduce the amount of information being shared in the Berserker community. So hopefully we can put you on a good track to start. Alright, first off, I want to go over the skills that you need to have locked while you're playing Awakened Berserker. Starting with the main hand skills, there are 5 skills you can take a look at locking. The first one is going to be Falling Rock. This is preference. You don't need to do this. It just stops you from accidentally putting in the input if you use Predatory Hunt. You could also choose to lock Predatory Hunt if you'd like. By doing so, it's going to allow you to use certain animations out of other abilities. So for example, when you press E for your grab, you'll be able to use spacebar to use your ground lifting instead of going into a Predatory Hunt. This also allows you to use Flamebuster backwards while you're in your axis when this is locked. That said, I'd like to use this skill sometimes, so I choose to leave this one unlocked. Next up, you're going to want to lock Quaking Fury. This one is the required lock. This is going to prevent you from adding additional CC in your Preawakened combo when you grab people. Then I also have Weakling Hunt and Tackling Rock Locked. These ones are going to be more preference. These are just abilities that I don't use, so I don't want the key inputs to influence what I'm doing. And then I want to point out that your evasion on this class needs to be unlocked. Most classes in the game lock their evasion, but this is used in accelerating your animations for certain abilities such as Titan Blow. We'll talk more about that later. Going into our Awakening locks, we're going to take a look at 3 skills here primarily. We're going to lock Titan Step. We're also going to lock Flamebuster. Locking Flamebuster allows us to accelerate this animation. And then we're also going to lock Earth Dividing. We're going to be using this ability off of a hotkey. The reason that we lock Titan Step is because this has an interaction with Flamebuster where you're not able to shoot out of the Titan Step if Flamebuster is locked. Other than that, you don't have to lock anything else under the Awakening tree. Underneath our skill enhancements, our main option at level 56 is going to be Pharaoh Stampede. This is an unprotected charge. This is something that you're going to want to be using. The rest of these options don't really matter too much. Under level 57, you have Wailing Beast, which is a super armor, or you have Axe of Destruction, which is an unprotected knockdown in PvP. Both these abilities aren't really something that I ever press while I'm fighting people. On 58, you can take Frenzy Winds if you like. This is going to be an unprotected float. This is an ability you're going to have to hotkey. I personally don't press this button ever. I feel like it's not necessary. You have other options to catch people that are safer. Alright, and lastly, here are my add-ons. I feel like this page is a good standard for people to just start with. I feel like Berserker is a highly personalized class, and as you gain more knowledge and experience with the class and form your own opinions, you can change these add-ons to be more catered to your own playstyle. I'm using this page for open world and AOS currently. If I was going to play this for capped Node War, I'd put more bleed on my abilities on things like Flamebuster, for example, and maybe Seismic Blast. But for the most part, I think you can run this page in any form of content and be acceptable, because Berserker isn't typically going to be killing people inside of a tier 1 Node War anyways. Alright, next up I want to talk about the difference between Flamebuster level 1 and Flamebuster level 3. In our last patch, we received the buff to the damage on Flamebuster level 3. The problem here is that when you use Flamebuster level 1, you're able to spam the ability while you're in Titan Syndrome. So it's going to look something like this. So when you switch to Flamebuster level 3, you lose access to the Flamebuster spam from level 1. I feel like this is something that you typically be using inside of large scale. Node Wars, Siege, content of that nature. The Flamebuster level 1 having the spammable option gives you a little bit more damage. That said, in any kind of content where people are going to see you spamming unprotected damage into a group, you're going to get punished for it. So in content like BA, content like Open World PvP, Arsha, AOS, I would typically put my Flamebuster on level 3. It gives you a little bit more chip damage. I don't believe it's typically going to make or break a fight. But it definitely does add up over time if you're shooting Flamebusters at people on cooldown to have the level 3 there. Regarding our core, the core that I recommend you run 100% of the time while you're learning is Titan Blow. There are arguments for some of these other cores, typically ground lifting. That said, I think that you're able to play Titan Blow in 100% of content all the time and be successful. And until you're able to get comfortable enough to form your own opinions and test out some of these other cores on your own, if you just throw Titan Blow on and forget about it, you'll be perfectly fine. Alright, next up I'm going to talk about Berserker's neutral. I'm going to talk about basically, I think the fundamentals of every class is how do you catch people and how do you stay protected. Damage is something that we can worry about a little bit later. So focusing on how you're going to catch people while playing Berserker, there are 3 main range CCs I'm relying on to catch people when I'm fighting. The first one is going to be our Flamebuster. The second one is going to be the Flow for Flamebuster, which is shooting mobility. And the last one is going to be Titan Blow. To overview these abilities very quickly, Flamebuster, if you have it applied to a hotkey, you're going to have it locked, and you're going to use it by holding right click and tapping the hotkey twice. If you only tap the hotkey once, you're going to raise the Ironbuster, charge it, and the forward guard is going to come out a little bit slowly. But if you tap the hotkey twice, you're going to get the forward guard immediately, and it's going to charge much faster. This is going to give us a ranged knockdown. The flow for this ability, shooting mobility, can be used by tapping A, S, or D while holding your Flamebuster up. This is going to throw you backwards and give you a stiffen. This is completely unprotected as well. Something that we want to acknowledge is that whenever we hit that stiffen, we're going to need to follow up, and typically I'm using these same range CCs to follow up off of the stiffen when I hit it. The last one is Titan Blow. This is going to be our shift to right click. This is a 3-hit combo. The first 2 hits are going to apply stiffen to the target, and the last one is going to be a knockdown. Now we are able to accelerate the animation on Titan Blow. This can be done through some of our abilities. The easiest one I like to use to get to the last hit of Titan Blow to rush out the knockdown is going to be using the side evasion into Titan Blow, so it looks something like this, to be able to get the knockdown immediately. So a practical application of how I might catch somebody from range is if I shoot out a shooting mobility and it connects, I might immediately evasion into a Titan Blow to get a follow-up, and then from there I would Lava Piercer and do damage. With the range CCs covered, a couple other ways that I might catch people is through our Shift Q ability, which is the AoE Roar. This is an ability that you can cancel with Shake Off, so once you press the key, you can shake off immediately and you'll have people inside of a stun. Off of that, you can typically follow up either through maybe an Ancient Wave, you can shoot the Ironbuster at point blank at them, that's a fine option as well. You could follow up by hitting a shooting mobility and then cancel it into a Titan Blow. Those are all fine options on things that you can do. The biggest thing that you want to do here, though, is make sure that you're not following up off of these CCs with a grab. Grab's going to be your initial CC. You don't ever want to put somebody on a CC cap by using grab, because the bound that comes from the grab is a shorter CC than a knockdown. Alright, next up I'm going to talk about our grabs. Awakened Berserker has 3 grabs, and 2 of these grabs will be influenced based on whether or not we're in our Ironbuster or our axes. So if we press E at any time, we'll always use the same initial grab. But the other 2 grabs, the rooting and the overhead grab, will be dependent on whether you're pressing Shift E inside of Flamebuster or inside of your axes. Something I use to influence the kind of grab that I'm going to get is when I press Lava Piercer, if you press Shift Spacebar while in the Buster, you'll stay in the Buster, which will take you into a rooting. But if you press Lava Piercer through a hotkey, that's going to switch you to your axes no matter what stance you're in, and then I can press Shift E to get the overhead grab. And then if you press E at any time on any target, no matter what stance you're in, you're always going to get the same grab. So something to consider when you're grabbing people is the speed of the grab, how fast that you're going to come out of that animation, and whether or not you can hold them in that animation. So for example, if I was to lead in with a rooting, this is going to be a very fast grab animation where I can come out of it and I can follow up. That said, if I follow up with the overhead grab, this allows me to hold other players, so that way my teammates can do damage to them, and I can spin it and continue to keep them CC'd for a longer period of time. The last thing to consider when you're using your grabs is that when you utilize your Undertaker ability, which is going to be spaced while you're grabbing people, or your Corpse Storm ability, which is going to be the right click, you're going to apply a DP debuff to the enemy. So when I right click here, if you look at the top frame, I've applied a DP debuff. And in a team fight, that is something that you can absolutely utilize. In AOS, if you have a target isolated, if you're able to extend the grab, your teammates are doing damage to it, you're going to want to be getting that DP debuff up. Think of yourself more as a support than a damage dealer. Something that you want to be conscious of is that when you're grabbing people, you are also locked in that animation, and it's very common that other players will drop damage on you while you're grabbing, and that can get you killed. So try to be mindful whether or not you want to extend the animation, what kind of grab you want to use, how fast it needs to be, etc. And this is something that's going to come with experience as you play the class. Something to consider regarding our grabs is that with the new grab changes, I feel like personally grabs are much harder to hit nowadays. I don't typically try to grab moving targets, and I'm going to typically use it to either peel my teammates, or I'm going to try to grab somebody while they're in their damage if they're trying to SA trade into me. I'm looking to stop SA trades, and I'm looking to peel damage. It's pretty rare that I'm aggressively grabbing people. If I'm grabbing somebody in large scale, I'm typically using it to peel my backline to make sure that my archers are staying protected, essentially. I play this class with the mentality that my job is to peel before doing damage, and I'm currently using my grab in the same way. I'm using my grab primarily to stop damage, opposed to opening kill windows nowadays. And that might just be me, but in my experiences, it's much harder to grab a grab, currently than it used to be in the past iteration of the game when we had access to things like click to move. Alright, next up I want to talk about movement. In order to talk about movement, we're going to have to talk about our hotbar. So there's a couple abilities that I feel like are mandatory to be on your hotbar. So go ahead and try to drag these on comfortable buttons that you can spam. But the first one's going to be your Ironbuster. You need this to accelerate the animation like we talked about prior. And then you're also going to need to have a hotkey for blasting. This is used for your main unprotected movement. Something else I also recommend having hotkeyed is Lava Piercer. Again, this is so that way we have the option to enter Lava Piercer with our axes while we're in our Flamebuster. That's down here. I also recommend hotkeying Time to Rock. This allows us to go into our axes and use this ability while we're in our Ironbuster. Other things that I have hotkeyed, Earth Dividing, something that we're going to need because we have it locked. I have Flame Pummel hotkeyed. You don't need to have this one, it's a little bit optional. I also have Rock Smash hotkeyed. And the purpose of having Rock Smash hotkeyed is that I can press the hotkey while I'm in my Ironbuster to be able to get the overhead grab in the case that I want to extend a CC on another player. It's probably not super necessary. You can probably typically just press E and then do your spin if you want to off that one. But if you hit them with a rooting, you're not going to be able to do the spinning and extend the animation. So that way I just like to have that available, so if I need it, I can press the button. Lastly, something else I missed is that you're going to need to have Titan Syndrome hotkeyed. There is no keybind for this ability. This is the class's iteration of its ebuff. So your big cooldowns. I have this on my F2. You just make sure that you want to put it on a button that you're not going to press by accident, but it's easily accessible. Alright, so regarding Awakened Berserker movement. Awakened Berserker movement is pretty much changing between protected and unprotected movement based on how far away your enemy is and how safe you are. So our main bread and butter movement while we're in our Ironbuster is going to be a shakeoff spam. This is our highest stamina consumption, and the way we're going to do this is by holding right click, and while we have blasting on our hotkeys, we can hold either A or D to jump in a direction, and every time that we press the blasting hotkey, we'll hop again. You can alternate it, you can go in one direction, and as you see, our stamina is burning very, very, very quickly. So ways that we're going to get stamina back while moving. There's not a lot of options, but if we use our Shift X ability, if I burn some stamina off here and we press Shift X, we will continue to generate stamina while we're moving. Other than that, the majority of our movement abilities are going to stamina lock us and spend a small amount of stamina. So ways that we're getting stamina back outside of that is through our super armors. So if we press, for example, Devastation, or punch in the ground, we'll be in super armor, we'll get our stamina back. Same thing applies to the flow. If we press the flow, we're going to get our stamina back. Same thing applies with our Slugfest. If we press Slugfest, we'll hold a super armor, we'll get our stamina back. So those are a couple buttons you could be alternating to try to get stamina back while you're stationary once you've gotten away from the target. Ways that we're going to be moving protected while running away from people are going to be things like Giant Leap, Time to Rock, and Lava Piercer. So if we press Lava Piercer, it's going to consume a little bit of stamina, and it's also going to stamina lock us. So we're not going to generate any stamina. We've got a little stamina cost associated with that. Same thing's going to apply with Giant Leap. No matter what direction you go in, there's going to be a stamina cost for the first and the second leap for it, right? So it's going to go down in 2 dents. Time to Rock isn't going to cost any stamina, but it will stamina lock us. That said, it's a way to move without costing stamina. So we're going to chain together all of our abilities so that way we are using as little stamina as possible while moving quickly away from enemies, so we can create space to regenerate stamina again and approach from ranged. So before I go into actual movement combos, something to acknowledge is one of our accelerations to get into our Ironbuster. When we are in our axe, we're able to use Seismic Blast off of certain abilities. In the case of movement, my favorite way to do this is by using Time to Rock. You can hold Seismic Blast out of it, and you'll go into your Ironbuster. And the reason for this is that when I use one of my abilities that will take me into axes, like for example Shift X, I like to follow it with a Time to Rock, Seismic Blast, and then we can immediately go into a Giant Leap out of that. And the Seismic Blast is going to accelerate the animation of the Giant Leap. So everything accelerates each other. So our Time to Rock will accelerate our Seismic Blast, which accelerates our Giant Leap, which allows us to continue to make space. Okay, so regarding movement, I don't actually have a dedicated movement rotation. I kind of just take a look at what abilities are off cooldown and what I might need in whatever situation I'm in. The way that I kind of flowchart this in my brain is, do I need to be protected or not? In the case that I don't need to be protected, I'll just typically spam Shake Off. In the case that I do need to be protected, I'm going to use my other skills, right? So I'm typically defaulting to a Shake Off if I'm able to. And there's a couple reasons for this, but typically if you're able to move around unprotected, you're also in a place where you can regenerate your stamina. So in the case I wanted to move around, let's just pretend I was in a fight, I burned some stamina, it would typically look something like this. And then at this point, I should be far enough away that I can regenerate stamina as appropriate, right? I can hold my super armors, so I can just hold here for a second. If somebody reapproaches me, I can shoot range and take the fight from there. Now, something you just want to be mindful of with this class, if you run out of stamina, you are just going to die. You want to make sure that you are leaving situations and creating space before you get to that point. So typically, when I'm about half stamina, 40% stamina is when I start to think about leaving, even if I'm safe. Just because at that point, if I'm not able to immediately go into a super armor to get my stamina back, I want to kind of disengage so that way I can take a moment to breathe. Good players are going to pressure you and stop you from doing this, and at that point you become a little bit more dependent on your teammates and what's going on around you in order to get that stamina back. Before I start covering damage and combos, there's one thing I want to go over regarding a lock skill. So something that I didn't cover in my locks is Predatory Hunt. This is an ability that I personally like to use. That said, there's an interaction on our grabs that prevents you from using ground lifting out of your E-grab with Predatory Hunt. So if I grab a target, and off of the grab I press spacebar, I'm going to go into the air before I'm able to use a ground lifting. And this is because Predatory Hunt is unlocked. Now in the case of the other grabs, if I go ahead and I press any other grab, and I press spacebar off of it, I'm going to go into ground lifting immediately. So this is an interaction that is unique only to your regular E-grab, only when you have Predatory Hunt unlocked. Just in case you don't know, Predatory Hunt is the leap. It applies a bound, and you can hold a super armor in it. It is not a skill that I use constantly, but it is something that I pull out occasionally in an AOS match if I'm really desperate and being focused. Alright, now in order to do damage on Awakened Berserker, we're going to have to understand the bread and butter of how the class works. In short, everything I do kind of revolves around Seismic Blast, which is going to be our back Q button. If we press back Q outright, we're going to do a shot in front of us. This shot's going to be relatively slow, and we're able to accelerate this animation a couple different ways, primarily by using other abilities. So for example, if we use Blasting, which is back left click, we can seismic out of it very, very quickly. This is also applicable to things like ground lifting, for example. We're able to ground lift into a Seismic Blast, and it will come out almost instantly. Now, a couple other ways that we have damage in our kit is that off of our cannon shots, we're able to left click to do split shots. So our cannon shots are going to be Seismic Blast, which is back Q, Scatter Shot, which is Shift F, Titan Blow, which is Shift right click, and then Ancient Wave, which is going to be Shift back right click. And if we left click out of any of these animations, we're going to go into a split shot. Now something that we need to be mindful with split shot is that this skill is an air smash. And what that means is that if we use it on a target that is floating, we are going to shorten the amount of CC that the target is on the ground for. We're also going to push the target away from us, sometimes out of our range. Now, they've recently removed the float from ground lifting and moved it onto the core. So this is going to be a little bit less prevalent nowadays. But just something that you want to be mindful of is that if you have your opponent in a float and you split shot straight off of it, you're going to air smash the opponent, and this is typically bad. There are times where you might want to just throw it out to get the damage out and you're going to leave anyways. You're not synced for the full CC duration. But for the vast majority of the time, you just want to be conscious that you're trying to not split shot an enemy who's in a float. Air smashes are not desirable. Alright, I'm going to break your actual combo down into 2 parts. I'm only going to go over 1 damaging combo on this class for now. When you're starting, the best thing is to not overwhelm yourself. You should be more focused on staying protected, you should be more focused on getting catches, and the damage will come over time. But in short, this is going to be a rotation that goes through all of your cannon abilities. So our goal here is that we're going to CC the target, and then we're going to hit them with a blasting, into a seismic blast, into a scatter shot. We're going to split shot off of that into an ancient wave. We're going to split shot off of that into a titan blow. Now with split shot, and this is by left clicking on any single one of your cannon shots, this will always put you into the last hit of titan blow. And that's where the majority of the damage is. That is where the CC is. In this case, we're going to be using it for damage. So the way this is going to look is we're going to approach the target, and I'm going to use lava piercer into a ground lifting. We're going to blasting, seismic split shot, ancient wave split shot, titan blow split shot, and we can slugfest off the end of that. That's going to go through all of your abilities and do a decent amount of damage. There are other ways to do damage, but this is just kind of the bread and butter to be trying to approach with. It uses all of your skills. You will be able to have some variations on this. Alright, now, going through that combo, it is relatively long. You were in forward guard for the most part. You are dropping your protection every single time that you split shot. It's not a great combo when there's other people around. So, ways that you can accelerate these combos or ways that you can break them up. The Shift F ability, the scatter shot, isn't that important to the combo. It's not applying a re-CC. This is pretty much just straight damage. So if I was to engage on another player and I wanted to go straight into damage, I could blasting seismic into the ancient wave, titan blow, and then leave. Now another way that we could do damage quickly without committing is that we could even just approach with a lava piercer ground lifting, seismic, and we can instantly giant leap out of it, right? And that would be more along the lines of poke damage. Basically, you just want to understand that your hardest hitting skills are going to be prepping with Seismic Blast, and then hitting them with Ancient Wave, and the last hit of Titan Blow are going to be your biggest damage dealers. After that, Slugfest is pretty good to finish enemies. The problem with Slugfest is that when you press it, you're not able to turn it. And when you're using this at the end of the combo, people will often get out. Or they'll get up and start to run from you, or they might grab you, so you don't want to overcommit to this, and that can be interrupted by just using a shake off to get out of the animation. Alright, next I'm going to talk about the Axe move kit. I'm going to try to simplify this as much as possible for you. When you are learning the Axe move kit, there are only 3 abilities we need to worry about. The first one is Frenzy Destroyer. If you hold S, left click, right click, you'll slam your axes into the ground, and this is going to give us a 28 melee AP buff. The next one is our Stomp. It's called Storming Beast. This is just F on your keyboard, and we're typically going to be using this to apply the melee evasion minus 12 for 10 seconds on our opponents. It does apply things like minus casting speed, attack speed, and movement speed, but this is for 5 seconds, and the way that we're using this skill, they're going to be in CC for 5 more seconds before they actually get out of our combo. So we're typically just using this only for the melee evasion. And then headbutt. So if we shift right click, this will be a knockdown, and we can use spacebar to ground lift to put ourselves in the buster out of that. Now I want to clarify that if you press W right click, you're going to use a headbutt without the CC on it. So when you're headbutting for a knockdown, you need to make sure that you're pressing shift right click are the only buttons that matter. If you press shift W right click, you will still get the CC, right? But from a W right click, you will not get the CC. So you want to make sure that you're specifying using the correct headbutt when you're using your combo. Now, the ways that we're actually going to tie these skills together, and I'm going to do this pretty slowly, is that, let's say theoretically, we get a grab on an opponent. We're going to use Frenzy Destroyer to get the 28 AP debuff, or I'm sorry, the 28 AP buff on us. We'll stomp out of that to shred their evasion, and then we can knock them down with a headbutt. Out of that, we can ground lifting, and then we can blasting seismic and go into our damage rotation like we talked about before. Now, sometimes you're going to grab people, and let's just say you catch them with rooting, you're going to be in your Ironbuster. something to think about is that you do not need to be in your axe to follow up the combo. The axe is optional. This is typically something that you're doing in a 1v1. It's very unprotected. It's not something you're going to be doing in a group fight. So something that you can consider is that, let's say you had a rooting, you're in your Ironbuster, you can come out, you could theoretically blasting Seismic into an Ancient Wave for the re-knockdown into the rest of your damage chain, right? Something else you could do is, depending on the situation, is hit them with rooting and then just immediately Ancient Wave straight out of it to get the re-CC. Depending on what's going on around you, do you have time to deal damage? Can you afford to hit a blasting Seismic first? So a lot of the times the answer is going to be no. So now to put a scenario of a fight in your head, the way that I'm going to be approaching most classes playing neutral at about this range here is that I'm going to be primarily playing as a range class looking for my catches. I'm not going to look to do any melee unless, 1, I'm forced to, or 2, I catch a CC. So typically I'm just going to start by shooting my Ironbuster. Maybe it hits the target, maybe it doesn't. Off of that, I might shoot shooting mobility. Maybe it hits the target, maybe it doesn't. After that, if they're far away, I can shoot all my Titan blows at them. In the case of certain classes, you don't want to do this. It's going to lock you to an animation and get you punished, but sometimes you can do that and you just throw damage, break people's frontal guard, put some pressure on them. Sometimes I'll make a mistake and get caught by the stiffen, right? As soon as I hit one of these CCs, I'm going to follow up with a Lava Piercer. And then I'm going to go into my damage rotation that we talked about, where I Seismic, Ancient Wave, Split Shot. And in this case, I don't have Titan Blow because I used it for the catch. So here, I could have just hit Slugfest, for example. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is applications of Devastation. Our Devastate ability, which is going to be our down right click, or our hotkeyed skill for the flow, in my case is 3, is going to apply slows on people when we hit the ground. This is just something that we should be mindful of, is that when we're channeling our super armors and we're trying to hold a position, we are slowing other players. We can use this to peel our teammates. Occasionally, if somebody's chasing down one of my teammates, I will giant leap towards them, and then I'll try to go ahead and hit my flow to get the slow on them, to try to slow them down, and then I'll aim for CCs after that. In the case I get a catch, I can do damage, right? The last thing I want to talk about is Titan Syndrome. This is, again, if we go to our Awakening, this is our E buff. We have to put it on a hotkey. When we use this ability, something that we want to be mindful of is that it's going to accelerate some of our other abilities. So, for example, Ancient Wave has a charge up on it. When we use Titan Syndrome, we lose that charge up. So, for example, it looks something like this. Same thing's going to happen with our Ironbuster. Our Ironbuster is going to shoot out without the charge up. And those are our two main accelerations we're getting while we're in our E buff. This does make us do a considerable amount of damage, especially in content like AOS. It depends on the kind of content I'm playing. If I'm in a capped Node War, I'm using it to get faster animations. If I'm in AOS, I'm using it for damage, right? And that's just something that you want to be mindful of, is when you're in your damage window, some of your skills are going to interact a little bit differently than they normally would. Alright, next I'm going to go over all the ways I swap from my Axis to my Flamebuster and vice versa. If you do not know all the interactions with this class, it can sometimes feel like the class has a mind of its own, so making sure that you're very specific with your inputs is important to being successful. So some of the ways that I would ground lift out of my Axes is that you can ground lift off of Frenzy Destroyer by pressing spacebar. You can do this again with Headbutt by pressing spacebar. Now if you do this with the Stomp, you're going to jump into the air. Now you can see right if I press spacebar off of that, but that's something that you're going to want to typically avoid, right? So out of our Axis, ground lifting, and headbutt, we can go ahead and use spacebar to ground lift out of those. Now, from a time to rock, we are able to use Seismic Blast by holding back Q while in the air, and that's also going to put us into our Flamebuster. The next way that we can go from Axis to our Flamebuster is by using spacebar and Lava Piercer to ground lift again. Ground lifting is always going to put us into our Ironbuster, so any way that we use it. We can also do this off of some of our grabs to go into our Ironbuster. So we use the Axe grab, drop our target, press spacebar. We're going to go straight into our Ironbuster from ground lifting. Alright, and the last way that I can think of right now in order to go from your Axis to your Ironbuster is by using your Devastation flow. So in this case, it's 3 for me. If you ever find yourself panicked during your Axes and you're just not sure how to get back into your Ironbuster and you want to be into it, just press the hotkey. It puts you into super armor. It's probably one of the safest things you can do, considering that you're not facing an imminent grab. Outside of that, it's an OK button. Just press if you're not really sure what to do next. So next up, I'm going to cover all the skills that are going to put you into your Axe from your Ironbuster. We don't typically intentionally go to our Axe on purpose. It's more of a byproduct of using certain skills. So for example, if we press Shift X as part of our kite, we're going to go into our Axes, right? So then in that case, if I wanted to leave my axe and go back to my Ironbuster, I'm typically going to use Time to Rock into a Seismic Blast to go back into it. If we use our Shift Q, which is going to be our AoE Roar, that's going to pull us into our axes. At that point, you can C-swap. C-swapping is going to give you frontal guard if you hold A, S, or D. It's a pretty fast animation. Typically, that's how I would approach it. Something else that will put you into your axes is by using Lava Piercer from the hotkey. Again, if this isn't intentional, you can just press spacebar to go back into your Ironbuster. Alright, a couple other ways you may end up in your axes by accident is through your grabs. So in the case, if you use your rooting grab while you're on your Ironbuster with Shift E, and let's say you miss it, and you press Shift E again, that's going to take you into your axe grab, and that will put you into axes. Same thing applies if you use the regular E grab. This will also put you into your axes, sometimes not intentional. Just something to be conscious of. When you're using your grab that isn't rooting, you're going to end up in your axes. Another way that we're able to go from our axis to our Ironbuster is by using a forward giant leap. So just pressing WF will immediately put you in that animation, and then you can hold it to continue the jump if you'd like. Something else to consider here is that if you go ahead and you lock your Predatory Hunt because you decide that you don't want to use this ability, if you hit back F while in your axis, you will go into a backwards giant leap. Now, assuming this ability is unlocked, you will use the skill instead and begin leaping. That is up to you whether or not you want to lock that skill, as we talked about before. The last thing I really want to talk about is applications of Giant Leap. Giant Leap historically was used to connect with enemies. I don't really use it that way much anymore because it's very hard to land. But the way that I tend to approach Giant Leaping at people is creating V shapes. So for example, if I wanted to hit this target here, I could backward Giant Leap kind of in his direction and then chain it into a forward Giant Leap to go in the direction I want to go. Now, the accuracy on this is going to be pretty bad. It's not super consistent, right? But that's just kind of the rule of thumb that I'm looking for, is if I want to be in relatively the same space or I want to move forward less than the amount of a giant's leap, I will create a V shape to go where I want to go. Because if I was to do that same thing, but I just giant leap forward towards the target, I'm going to go over him. So using that little V technique is how I've been compensating with not having click to move and trying to land a little bit more accurately on the target I want to be on. Going forwards and then backwards, or backwards and then forward, is also just a good way to hold iframe super armor. If people are on you, you need to stall for your teammates and you kind of want to stay in the same spot. You don't want to move out of your own team's peels. Something to be conscious of is not running too far away from your teammates. Chaining and alternating your giant leap back and forth will pretty much put you in relatively the same place. Alright, and to conclude this video, I'm just going to roll some PvP footage in the background while I talk about my thoughts on the class, so that way you can kind of see how I'm playing it and the way that I'm trying to approach fights. In short, to summarize the way that I've been trying to play Awakened Berserker with these new changes is that I'm primarily playing as a ranged class. I'm primarily focused on peeling my teammates and getting CCs so that other people can help me secure kills. It is possible to land kills on this class by yourself. That said, in content like Tier 1, you're not able to solo combo somebody, right? In an AOS match, it's a little bit harder. And I don't play uncapped content personally, so I'm not really able to speak on Berserker's damage in that case, but from my understanding, it is less than other classes. So with that mentality, I'm playing as an offensive support role. My goal is to grab people that are doing damage to peel for my teammates. My goal is to get CC so that my teammates can land kills, to apply pressure, force people to V, things of that nature. Ultimately, you are, again, able to kill people. In a 1v1, you're going to have some okay matchups. You're going to have some bad matchups. Something more specifically that I've been conscious of is a matchup like a Musa, for example. I would typically play this super defensively and go for a grab. Nowadays, it feels impossible to get the grab, so I feel like the potency in a 1v1 for Awakened Berserker has overall gone down with these changes. As a result, I've just focused a little bit more on team play. I've been spending more time inside of AOS. I've been playing Node Wars with my guild, opposed to just solo roaming and kind of taking opportunities to be BA rat and stuff like that. I've just been focused on adjusting my play style so that I'm working with my class instead of against it. As I'm wrapping up this video, I realized I didn't talk about Berserker's BSR options, but in short, the main BSRs that I choose to use are going to be the Fearsome Tyrant, which is a 100%. And that's kind of it right now. With the changes to click to move, it's hard to drag the giant leap damage on top of other players, so it's not something that I'm really using consistently. Additionally, when you use the Fearsome Tyrant, the Shift Q alt, you're going to lock yourself into that same stun for the duration. There are some applications where it's good. A lot of the times you should expect it to get you killed. And if I'm using BSR and small scale, I've started Z-buffing myself. I'm not 100% sure if this is the optimal answer, but this is what I've been having success doing, is that instead of forcing an alt or trying to use the old giant leap alt, I've just switched to using my Z-buff and then using that to enhance my other skills. Hopefully this video has been helpful in figuring out whether or not you might want to play a Berserker, or if you are playing a Berserker, how you can approach and fight other players. Something I didn't talk about was crystals, and admittedly I don't know a lot about crystals because I am a red player, but I'm going to go ahead and flash my Noble War crystals as well as my BA crystals at you, just so you can kind of have an idea of what I'm running. I'm going to be transparent, these probably aren't optimal, and I haven't updated my crystals in a very long time, but it is a baseline if you absolutely just need something to start with. For the most part, I would recommend taking a look at the Berserker Discord, seeing what crystals people are running in there, try to figure out the meta for the crystals at the current time that you're watching this video, and go from there, because crystals get updated pretty consistently anyways with new crystals coming out, and how the meta shifts with caps.